Welcome to the Impact Learning Visionaries podcast, where we celebrate the unsung heroes of the learning and development industry. As always, we'll be bringing some laughter and a bit of fun along the way, but more importantly, you'll get some incredible insights, key lessons, and unique perspectives on everything related and possibly unrelated to training and development. Let's get this show on the road. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Impact Learning Visionaries podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by Laurie Stockel, who describes herself as a corporate gardener who sows the seeds of learning and growth. Laurie has harvested skills and knowledge from different fields, from sales to operations to marketing, and uses them to create a learning and talent development center of excellence that is the garden of continuous improvement. She knows that the best gardens need the right conditions, and in this case, it's a combination of the conditions, which are the soil, the strategy, which are the seeds, the leadership, which is the sun, the culture, which is the water, and the nutrients, which are the skills, and that you need all of these things in order to thrive. So in this interview, she's going to share her gardening hacks so that you can grow your own learning paradise, or if you are fans of Monty Python, your own learning shrubbery. Welcome, Laurie. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Jason. I'm really excited to be with you today.
Brilliant. Let's dive right in, put on our gardening gloves, and just so I'm obviously I've got to start with kind of tell me a little bit about this metaphor and like how you see kind of corporate learning and development as this garden, this kind of garden of different attributes. Dive into that a bit.
Sure, I definitely love to. So I can't take all the credit for that opening. I have to give credit to Casey. Casey is my digital assistant, also known as ChatGPT. And I really love the opportunity of using learning and development and coming up with analogies to help create a story. And through those stories and kind of that analogy, it really gets to what we do as learning and development people. You know, we are in the long game. You don't build gardens overnight, to the point you have to have certain conditions for that to be able to happen. So if we think about what all of those kind of conditions are, what we're able to do is really grow flowers. People love flowers. They love the smell of flowers. They love to give flowers. We also grow vegetables we need to eat. All of these things are really just metaphors for how we grow and develop as people so that we can be better, and whatever better looks like, whether we are better at our jobs or whether we are better in our relationships and better in life. So it's really been a lot of fun to work in learning development and come up with creative ways on how we promote the value of what it looks like.
That's brilliant. I really love that. Especially, well, not so much the vegetables part, because as my wife will tell you, green food is not my favorite. But I love the metaphor, and there was something specifically that you spoke about there, which is something I always like to kind of. It's something I'm very passionate about, and you talked about story, and how you kind of tell stories, and I'm really fascinated because I use story all the time, story in form of galvanizing teams, of creating that kind of true north in business. I use story in marketing, and even to a degree, I love this idea of this learning journey kind of being linked to a story. But curious as to how you utilize storytelling in your own kind of experience and your own journeys.
Well, you hit on something really important, Jason, that storytelling has been something that we've been doing since the beginning of time. And if you think about learners and how they really learn, they have to connect to something. So the best way to do that is through stories. And when we tell interesting stories that are a little bit out of the norm, that somebody can kind of cognitively connect to, that is something different, it really helps create an environment for them to learn and grow. So I love stories. In fact, that is also how we relate to people. So even, in the conversation we were having before we started, in our ability to talk about experiences that we had that were about stories, that is a foundation to really create a connection. And then that creates the environment for the garden to grow. So it's really fundamental to a lot of the work that I do is about storytelling in the L&D space.
Brilliant. And I mean, do you, I mean, just purely out of my own kind of curiosity is, you talked a lot about the kind of behavioral mechanics of storytelling, the fact that we get, kind of drawn into stories and that we see a little bit of ourselves in stories. But in the learning and development space, I've often kind of wondered how impactful stories are in kind of getting us almost through that kind of that almost the change management part of the learning journey is I see it so often when, for instance, we look at like e-learning and people, who, like so few people who finish e-learning courses, but the challenge is I've never spoken to somebody who's ever said, I actually have no interest in learning. I really couldn't care less. I don't want to learn anything. People always seem to have this passion for learning, but somehow the execution is always what lets us down. And I know this sounds like maybe a bit of a kind of a question that's gone all over the place, but what I was kind of just trying to understand is if you use stories to kind of try and keep people invested on the journey, like to kind of see it through and finish at the end and understand, like remember why they started this journey in the first place.
It's a really good question because it is one of the challenges that we have. And I have a saying that goes like this: time is the thief of opportunity. And what that means is that, conceptually people say, I want to be developed. If you read a lot of the studies, especially for young people as they're going for jobs, they basically saying development's important to me. And for many of them, that is true. That's what they believe to be true. But once kind of they get into their role and the day-to-day of life takes over, my biggest challenge is if I talk about learning opportunities, I get I do not have time. I do not have time. I have other priorities. And actually, in some ways, I think that's tragic. Because if we are not developing ourselves, then we are not growing. We are not able to be better. It's kind of like on a plane, put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on your child. Because if I can't be my best self, then how am I going to be better for my child? And this is something that I spend a lot of time thinking about because it's around inspiration. So in the idea of this garden is I'm trying to get people interested and more intrigued. So using storytelling to pull them in. And once I get them in, I have to show them the value of what's in it for them. Why is it important for them to learn? Why should they invest their time? So I really lean on my marketing experience from when I was in marketing to create a what's in it for me approach. To help the learner understand why they need to be invested. So there is a lot of inspiration, to use your word, that needs to be on the upfront to really help people through that time where they're making a decision. Do I have time? Do I not have time? Am I going to invest in myself or not? And hopefully after, we really give them some triggers to their minds to challenge their paradigm, to grow their own garden, so to speak. Hopefully we got them. And then we engage them continuously along that journey to be able to create the behaviors that we want them to develop, to be able to go on to do their next, whatever that next is. Sure.
I love that. So this whole topic of storytelling, and I was about to actually, you beat me to mentioning the kind of correlation to marketing and I love your kind of what's in it for me, right? Because that's like kind of one of the core tenets of marketing is understand your audience, make them the hero in your brand journey, and understand what's in it for them and how you've kind of correlated that across to learning and development. I think that's such a critical factor in engaging people, and maybe something that historically learning and development hasn't always done particularly well is looking at their, the employees in the organization as customers and trying to kind of motivate them and get them to almost make that buying decision that the company itself is trying to do with its customers, right? So it's super important. But on the topic of storytelling, really, really curious to hear a little bit more about your story. Like where have you said you kind of started in the marketing world and now you've ended up in kind of learning and development, and you kind of taking almost a T-shaped approach where you kind of integrating these skills learned in different disciplines. Be fascinated to find out a little bit about your personal journey.
That is a great question. I consider myself a serial transformer, and that is a combination of maybe my curiosity and my ADHD of continuously trying new things. Because I have done many, many things in my career, and it was really now in the latter part of my career that I fell into learning and development. But it's been a series of opportunities that have presented themselves. So, starting with the fact that I'm a super curious person and I'm always interested to learn something new. So my first job was I'll share the story. I grew up in a blue collar family, and my mom and dad had a vision for me and my sisters. The vision was that we were going to go to secretary school. We were going to go work for IBM, and we were going to meet our husbands, and then we were going to get married and have a family. So this was something that was kind of the vision my parents had. So I basically went to secretary school. My first job wasn't IBM. It was Pepsi, which was just as well. And when I got there, I started to look around and say, I can do other jobs here. And in a situation where I had, an opportunity to get promoted into a leadership admin role, I had a boss and a mentor that said that we see you're capable and we want to invest in you and we want to give you the opportunity. I was going to school at night full time and I was working full time. So I always had that curiosity and grit. And from that, I was promoted into my first leadership role, which was an assistant marketing manager at Pepsi. My contemporaries were at the top business schools, and I went to the local community college. How lucky was I? So in that situation, though, I realized that I spent all this time, effort, and energy into kind of building my capabilities. I missed out on some fun. So at the time, I had a cousin come and stay with me from Sweden who was traveling the world for 18 months. Never met him before. He and his girlfriend crashed on my couch for 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, I could do that. So I decided that I was going to take a year off and backpack around the world by myself, and said to Pepsi, I'm going to go do this. Can I come back? And they said, sure. Well, I came back a year later and the job was no longer there. And I had to sleep on my mother's couch and I had to get a car from my brother. I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. And that's where I found myself at Nestle Waters. And what I loved about Nestle Waters was Perrier back in the day before Nestle bought them. But my favorite part of the interview was the people that I met. People were more interested to know about my travel journeys and how I grew as a person and the impact that I had. In fact, I would say that my travel journeys going through, at that time, 40 countries, learning different languages, different currencies, how to navigate, kind of without a real internet at the time, was, a growth journey for me. And so that company and their interest in me said, I need to work here. And I spent many years there. And how lucky again was I to be able to end up in a place that allowed me to traverse to different roles. So when I got there, I worked in marketing. And from marketing, I went into operations. I was, in the Ready Refresher, the delivery business. I did lots of roles. Business development I fell into. e-commerce. That was something that they asked me to start up their e-commerce business because I had so many different like utility player roles that I kept getting asked and picked. And I had the curiosity to go and learn. Can I work with you? Can I learn more about what you do? Here's how I can connect something. And from that, I just had, now I was on my S curve, and I continue to use that curiosity to lean into different roles. And having an organization that valued that allowed me to take on roles that I had no business taking. And my favorite job, after I did the e-commerce and developed sales, I went into sales. I got tapped to be, would you like to take on learning and development for the sales team? I'm like, well, I don't know much about formal learning and development, but why not? And from that, I will never look back. I've been doing it for years now. I do it now with Godiva. And the opportunity, again, to unlock people, to find their passion points, to be able to be better, is better than any case of water I've ever sold, any box of chocolate, any can of Pepsi, because, back in the day. This is my calling now. I absolutely love this. And all of these experiences, plus the people and the opportunity, has allowed me to have a great career.
So there's so much there that I'd love to kind of delve into, but I mean, for me, the thing that stands out is this kind of concept of staying curious. This always being almost unafraid to try new things, and often gets approached by kind of graduates who say to me, I'm not really sure what I should do. And I always say, well, you won't know that answer until it kind of hits you in the face. And the best you can do is keep yourself open and try a whole bunch of different things, and until you find that thing that really resonates with you. And it seems like you've done that in spades. You've kind of lived this very full and rich life and left yourself open to opportunities, but in a really fascinating way. You also are a case study of what they describe as a T-shaped individual, as someone who's been in many different industries, many different kind of vocations, and has been able to kind of assimilate all of the different kind of patterns and practices from those different vocations into this kind of way of work. Now, the interesting part here is that we've had a lot of conversations on this podcast, and there's a theme that's always kind of traversed through the different conversations, and that is that one of the things that's fundamentally changing with this increased pace of technology, the strain that it's putting on our businesses and our jobs, is this need to kind of quickly pick up and learn these new skills of the future. And sitting at the heart of that is this kind of learning and development function, which historically used to act like a silo of the business that was just there to put courses together and wait for some line manager to come and say, I need my people to do this, and then go and find the best course for that and the most cost-effective one, because normally it was a cost center. But nowadays, it's more and more we're seeing this pattern where it's becoming this fundamental and strategic part of businesses. And that means that it's almost like kind of like a little mini CEO who needs to act as a learning and development function of these organizations. Now, I am coming to a question, and here it is by opening yourself up to all these different industries, all these different roles, and all these different areas of the organization, I'm curious to hear, how you believe that's kind of assisted you in being able to face this new emerging learning and development function in this new future of work.
I absolutely love this question, and I'm super passionate about it, because my take on this is that we are in a renaissance period for learning and development. And if you think about the old paradigm, what I would always call the drive-up window for learning and development, Oh, just like ordering a hamburger and fries, could I have a 3-day training course? And can you make sure you touch on this? And can you make sure this person's included? And can you just let me know when you do it? And thank you for your time. Those days of learning and development are kind of so far in the past that, they didn't do anything. They didn't change behaviors. People liked them and, they didn't do anything with them. But if you think about kind of where we are as a society right now and the change that's coming, as society, we have had so much to endure in the last 3 years. Think about the changes in kind of the COVID, the Great Resignation, social unrest, political issues. All these things are going on in people's minds. And now with what is coming with AI, generative AI, the future is even more scary. I mean, a lot of these major companies, the think tanks, are saying that the half skills of life are 40 to 50% in the next 4 or 5 years. That means that what I know today, I've got to know something different in 4 or 5 years. That is daunting. So as learning and development professionals, we have this amazing opportunity to use, let's say, the change management piece to get people inspired about what is it that we need to get after in a business. How do we get closer to the business and become a strategic partner to help that unlock that CEO to say, what is your biggest challenge? What does that future look like? It's really enabled HR in particular to go from like the old transactional, tick the box exercise to have a very smart seat at the table, because talent is what makes the difference. So I'm super excited about what learning and development and talent development can do to help companies succeed in the future, because it's no longer business as usual. That drive up window, it's a different story today.
Yeah, I love the analogy of the drive-up window. It's just a very, very apt way of how it used to work, and I think also a good reason why it can't continue to work that way, because we need to move away from being the fast food learning generation to being something more sustainable. And I guess what you're talking about, in terms of the skills that we learn today are going to be less relevant or irrelevant in 4 or 5 years' time. It's talking about a new set of underlying skills, like things like resilience and adaptability and agility and all the abilities, actually. So, in your mind, what do you like if you were advising the kind of generation of any generation, because I don't even think it needs to be the generations today, but anybody in organization right now who was sitting there panicking about what this means, what are the core skills that you would advise that they start to really kind of put into their tool belts to be able to navigate and sustain their way through these kind of choppy waters that are going to kind of face us in the future?
It's a really good question because, based on where generative AI is going, think about, how that's going to improve productivity. I believe that there are certain skills that are things that we do today that we will need to do in the future because technology will enable that. So what does that mean for us in our development? Well, we have to think about what that future looks like. And you use that word resiliency. So I think that probably is the most foundational skill that all of us could really lean into as it relates to what the future looks like. And I'll give you the for instance on that, is that I'm a big fan of Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset. And there's many case studies, including the case studies at Microsoft, where they brought that mindset in to go from a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. That is steeped in resiliency. Like, we have to change our paradigms. This whole concept for me is learn or die. Like, I don't mean to be so dramatic, but we have to think about what the future needs, and we have to have the right mindset. A growth mindset is really almost your fertilizer in the garden, if we go back to that garden analogy. And once we have that, then the most important skills as it relates to us is not to develop our Excel skills and get better at Excel, because Casey, my digital assistant, will take care of that. But more along the lines of critical thinking. How am I solving problems? But also leadership. Leadership comes not in the form of a role, but in a mindset of who we are. How do we act? How do we treat people? What examples do we want to set? I'm super passionate around leadership and really helping leaders, in particular people leaders, understand what that means for them and how they can lead and inspire their teams, because that's who's going to win in the future. Those companies that lean into that, especially in light of all of the distractions that are going on, I think is a winning ticket. So really it's, having the fertilizer for the growth mindset, being able to solve problems, and then having kind of core leadership skills as it relates to how we work.
And in those core leadership skills, one thing it's such a fascinating space to me, because if I look around at the world today, all I see is examples of really terrible leadership, and yet we're all desperate for these really authentic, genuine, transparent, impactful leaders. People who, pardon the French, give a shit. When you're kind of working with the leaders on these journeys, what are the key kind of challenges that you're dealing with, given that whenever they look over the fence to whether they're political leaders, whether they're people in mainstream media? I mean, it's frightening actually when we consider the state of leadership in the world today. So how are you kind of helping people navigate that and know what it means to be a great leader?
It's a really good question, because everybody will say they are a good leader, but they've never, not everybody. Let me take that back. If people have not been exposed to what the definition of leadership is, and then have had the pleasure of working or being part of a greater situation, which I have. I had that experience at my time with Nestle of working with some amazing inspirational leaders, Pepsi as well. I don't think I would have been where I am today without them. So, but you have to understand that many people didn't have that experience that I did. And one of the unlocks that I've had the pleasure of working on is a kind of something around cohort learning. I really think that we as learning and development practitioners need to set a standard for what good leadership looks like. And then we have to help people go through their own personal journeys as to try it on for themselves. There have been too many situations where I've seen leaders kind of, not have that training or that reflection of insight of what it is that you want to show up, and that the way they act or treat, especially people under stress, it's so damaging. It actually, there's no psychological safety. They've created, in some cases, hostile work environments or apathy. Nobody wants to work in apathy, right? So if in my situation, I've been able to take some LinkedIn learning courses because most companies have those. And for example, one that I did was, I forget the gentleman's name, but he does really good programming on executive leadership, executive presence. And by bringing a cohort together of people that want to develop their skills, putting them together, have them listen to them, let's have a cohort and a discussion. There were examples of Abraham Lincoln in this one, or Nelson Mandela, and examples of leadership, and then talking about what they did, what they thought, what their examples were. These stories, going back to the words of stories, kind of then create the climate of, well, I want to be that. I want to make sure that people say that about me, that they think that about me. That unlock of doing a cohort, of bringing people together with content that's interesting, stories, and then we put them on a stage to practice how they would coach somebody, and then in a safe environment, be able to give each other feedback on that, has been instrumental. Otherwise, what we do is we just throw caution to the wind a lot of times if we're not having discussions around what leadership looks like. And we have no idea what those conversations are. And if they're not done carefully and with care, they're going to be damaging. And then nobody wins in that situation. It's bad for business.
Absolutely. And as someone who has had a very interesting kind of journey through your career and is clearly knowledgeable on things like resiliency, on psychological safety, on growth mindsets, I'm really curious to kind of pick your brain and kind of get a sense of what you think, like where you think learning and development is going. Is it changing, and what do you think it's going to look like in maybe 4 or 5 years from now?
Well, going back to what we were talking about before, I think that, HR in general, but in a lot of cases, talent development in how we're investing in people is going to be where CEOs of the future are going to realize that, those intangible assets are where you need to invest. So in the old days, it was around, it's a cost center. Now it's a people booster. It's an enabler. I mean, imagine being able to use technology, the right mindsets, the learning and development platforms to create people that are going to produce 20% more. They're going to stay at a company longer. They're going to be passionate, engaged in other projects because they feel like they're part of something bigger. They have a purpose. These are things that HR and learning and development can do to enable that infrastructure for it. So I think that, CEOs and executive teams that are going to, I'll call it microphone, that particular mindset to be able to help amplify the opportunity and to be shoulder to shoulder with the talent development person on telling people, don't let time be the enemy of opportunity here, and get in the game because we're going on this journey together. And I need me to be my best self, and I need you to be your best self. And we're going to do it together. So that type of kind of partnership and with a senior leader to create that climate for success is just like, it's going to be gravy. It's going to pay for itself. So I really hope that in time, when we have a foundation of metrics and the right kind of, things to measure, that we can prove this to be a valuable, critical business partner, and it's not going to be on the chopping block of of decisions because it's a cost center.
Yeah, I and in many ways, I think those metrics are actually there today and right in front of a lot of people, because learning and development metrics shouldn't be any different than the business metrics. It should be directly correlated. I think the days of having marketing having its basically its own metrics and talking, kind of about the number of clicks and engagement metrics, which at the end of the day have always driven me mad, because the business doesn't run on engagements and click-throughs. It runs on sales and revenue. I see kind of learning and development directly, the future of learning event directly kind of being integrated into what the core metrics are of the business. But my kind of next question that follows on from that is a lot of these and what you've described and what the industry describes are, we categorize them under this kind of blanket term of soft skills. And soft skills are in their own way quite challenging to teach to people for a couple of reasons. One is that, being able to measure soft skills has always been quite difficult. How do I know that I'm more resilient? Basically, I can now lift 20 kilograms. I know I'm stronger, but how do I know I'm more resilient? How do I know I'm a better communicator? How do I know I'm better at conflict resolution management or critical thinking? So there's the metrics and measurements of it, but also the way of teaching soft skills historically has been a little bit hit and miss. And I think you've touched on one area I think is very valuable, which is cohorts-driven learning, being able to learn from your peers. But Are you seeing any other ways where there's more efficacy in the way that we learn soft skills? Because it can't be through engineered role-playing scenarios, because historically, I don't think those have been very effective.
Yeah. First, I'm going to address something that bugs me. This term soft skills. They're not soft. They're really hard. They're the hardest to learn. And in fact, I've rebranded them. I call them always on skills because they are transferable no matter what job you go to. And they are so important for people to be successful. It's kind of the mortar in the brick and the mortar building of a house. You have to have the ability to have that to get things to stick together. So I think that, there are kind of, if you're measuring them, they're really hard to measure, but there is ways to be able to do it. And a lot of them are through feedback and having the ability to talk about a skill that you're developing. So for example, I'm big into creating in learning environments for people to identify their skill gaps and then prioritize where they are. And many times they're soft skills that they have. So you can go put together a 70-20-10 plan on how you're going to develop those skills. And part of it in the 20% or in the working with others is to get feedback. So cohort learnings right now, I think are the best thing since sliced bread, because after COVID, everybody wants to be seen. They want to be together. They want to develop those relationships. So cohort learning is it. And when you have that trust, then there's the feedback piece. So there's a feedback piece to be able to tell somebody, I am working on my communication skills, Jason, and I've done this. I have a couple presentations coming up. I would love for you to give me some feedback on what I'm doing well and where my opportunities are. And by asking a colleague to help me with that, I'm getting feedback. I'm going to ask my boss to do the same thing. So I could build some metrics into that. I could create a opportunity of a pre, a post, and a post to be able to get after that. And I have. But it's really around identifying what that always on skill is that you're looking to do, having a roadmap on what you're going to do, and having somebody that's going to help coach you, give you feedback, and help you along your journey. And I had fear. I was afraid. I had a situation where I was asked to present at a conference with 200 people, and I had to go to my leader that day to say, I'm frozen. I can't do it. I had to ask one of my my teammates to do it. Now I love talking to people. I love to be in situations like this because I developed those skills to be able to do it. So that's, kind of the future, I think, of skill development is around a cohort and being able to have people that you can trust after you've identified what you need.
Brilliant. And I'm loving, by the way, I'm just loving all of the analogies and these little terms that you kind of are dropping. And I'm going to definitely end up rewatching this so I can actually write them all down and use them. But always, as we're coming to the end, I always like to ask two closing questions. Just because, we're on this learning journey, it's about storytelling and it's about giving back and adding value. So the first question I always like to ask is, if based on all your experience, all your wisdom, your kind of journey in learning and development, and being able to kind of share some sage advice with others out there, is, right now, if someone was starting their journey in learning and development, they were going kind of on this journey to, kind of towards mastery, to kind of build up their experience, become I suppose just navigate all of this new complexity, this massively kind of like seismic shifting space that's happening because of large language models, technology, everything else. What is the kind of key thing, the key piece of advice, that little nugget of wisdom that you would give someone who is starting out on their journey?
Well, this is a calling, in my opinion, because it's really about leaning into helping people, right? At the end of the day, you have to have a servant heart in order to be in this spot. And so starting off with what is driving you, where your passion points are. And if you're kind of like me, it took me a while to get here, but I always had people at the center of what drives me. So if that is indeed something that calls on you, that lands on your heart, that is wonderful, because then maybe you are a very good learning and development practitioner. And from that, use your curiosity to be able to really ask very good questions to understand what problems you're trying to solve. And then marry that with your true opportunity of helping people that wanting to grow and develop. And of course, you need the secret sauces of, instructional design and all of the hacks as it relates to being good, but go and make people better. I mean, whatever that better is, you get to play in that space. And at the best part of the day, they're going to come to their own conclusions to get better, but you will sleep good at night because in some way, shape, or form, you help enable that. And that is why I'm going to do this in my, forever. I'm recently a certified coach. I went and got my coaching certification because I love helping people unlock themselves. So I continue to go up my growth journey. And that's what I can say to people. Do that too, because it is one of the most fulfilling careers that you could have.
Thank you. I love that. And I really wholeheartedly agree. Is not only does it make your personal journey very rewarding, but it's, I think it's it is actually what it's all about, right? It's about making that person the hero in their learning journey and caring deeply about their success.
Yes, better said. Thank you.
Yeah. No, you said it way better. So final question is, we always ask someone back the kind of I guess the star and the reason we price the car, or the guest of the show, to use the Top Gear analogy, is there a book or a podcast that you recently read or listened to that you can kind of share with the audience, something that's had a profound effect on you, or kind of made you rethink or reframe something in your kind of worldview?
Well, I love the concept of learning in the flow of work, and I'm a continuous learner. As you can see, I geek out on books and podcasts and different stuff. So recently I read a book called CEO Excellence. And, if I'm thinking of myself as a value add to a company, I want to make sure that I understand what the learner goes through, right? I think a CEO setting a vision for a company is probably one of the most loneliest jobs of all. They have no boss and they have a ton of bosses. When you think about the board and you think about their C-suite and really the employees, it's a great responsibility that's not for the faint of heart. And for me, I, want to be that person that adds value to a company. So I want to understand what they go through. So this book was amazing for me because it gave examples of some of the top CEOs in today's standards, because the job is getting harder and harder, and what their purview is on how they tackle their role. Because I want to be able to make sure that I am thinking through what's in it for me, the mindset of my CEO, so I can bring value to them by understanding that perspective. And that is something that's very important to me as I've grown and matured in my learning journey, is I want to make sure that I understand my people and their perspectives, because that's the best way that I can help get them the opportunities of growth and value of what they need.
Brilliant. Right. Well, we've come to the end of our gardening journey. And it's been really, really honor and a privilege wandering through this virtual garden with you, Laurie. And I will now forever see the learning and development journey as a garden, or as I prefer it, a shrubbery, of which to nurture and manicure into something beautiful. So thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for the Monty Python reference. That was awesome. It was awesome. It was my pleasure. And I look forward to continuing to follow you, Jason.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Impact Learning Visionaries. If you found it interesting or helpful, please subscribe by clicking on the button down below so you don't miss our next one. Also, be sure to check out our Reality Bites blog for more information on how technology is aiding in learning development. Links are all in the description below. Go check it out. Thanks a lot. Bye.